ladies and gents, how are you doing? Thanks a million for giving up a couple of hours out of your evening to join us tonight. We're really delighted to have Frank Berry with us. We're just going to wait. There's a good few people on board now having a little look. Just bear with me. If you have any questions, guys, just on the right-hand side, you'll see the taskbar. You can drop some questions there. And you'll also, on the top right-hand side, you'll see the people icon there, and you can see who else is kind of on board. So we'll just wait for Paul, and then we shall kick on there. Sorry about this again.
Yeah.
We'd no issues last week.
Oh wow. I'm looking at all these great people. If I start naming them, I have to name them all. So, but just it's great to see so many familiar faces there.
Oh, fantastic.
Great.
Okay, so guys, if you, Frank very kindly was on the podcast and also joined us at a Christmas for a session and a little bit of a chat as well, based on kind of the feedback that we get from these type of sessions that we do. We tend to get back, or to ask people, invite people to come back again and speak, because the audiences tend to respond to them. So yeah, I guess we'll start at the beginning while we're waiting for Paul.
Yeah.
And get the golden years out of the way. When did kind of filmmaking happen for you when you were a kid? When was your first, I suppose, tangible memory of kind of film in general kind of happen?
Okay, well, I don't remember them as golden years in terms of a very, very early passion for cinema. Certainly no more than anybody else that I was growing up with. You know, certainly wasn't the kid who was the film geek. You know, my passion for films was for entertainment. You know, Star Wars, Superman, E.T. You know, so early on it was very much the same as everybody else's, and then it's only really when I got a bit older, into my teenage years, I started to kind of seek more meaning in films, I suppose it's fair to say. And even then, in my teenage years, I would never have thought that I would be a filmmaker. That was way beyond my comprehension of what I thought I could achieve in life. But I started on a college course that was a film was a part of that, and I think my passion for cinema and for filmmaking started there. So it would have been quite late, I suppose.
What was the first movie you went to see in the cinema that you remember?
Okay, I think it was Herbie Goes Bananas.
We always ask people that, and you'd be amazed how many, like, there's a trend with certain types of movies depending on the age of the guest that we chat to. There's a lot of Terminator 2s in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Indiana Jones, and there's no wrong answer to any of these. And often people say that it had a profound kind of effect on them. Did Herbie go to, what was it? Herbie goes to
Herbie Goes Bananas. That was the earliest one we could see.
Bananas.
I remember interrogating my folks once about that, and that was as far back as we could figure out. Could have been something earlier, but no, I don't remember anything of it really. That was just the name that came out of the conversation. I don't remember too much. My earliest memories are probably E.T. and maybe one of the Star Wars films. You know, I don't consider as I said, they weren't really that formative for me in terms of what I do now. Do you know?
Yeah.
You know, that it was really. I mean, I still enjoy cinema in the same way. I still enjoy cinema as a form of entertainment, obviously. But I suppose the reason why I wanted to kind of hype up.
Hey,
The
Paulie.
reason why I wanted to devote my life to it, I suppose, or to make it my work, I suppose, came later, you know, and it was around the time when I started to feel that cinema could offer more than just entertainment, and that's really when it got a hold on me, you know.
Yeah. Where did you're from Dublin? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Foxfield in Raheny, north sider.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good. Northside for life. So and when did like what was there a kind of I wouldn't say light switch moment, but was there an awakening at some point in your young adult life where you realized that this may be something that you could pursue as a career?
Yeah, when I was in college, I started to watch a lot of films, and I started to become very aware of different forms of drama, I suppose. I remember watching lots of, Jimmy McGovern was a big influence on me around that time. He made these great TV films, or he wrote these great TV films that were rigorously researched. One was Hillsborough, another was Dockers, and then there was Sunday, and they came out in quick succession. They made an enormous impact on me because they had a kind of a conviction about them, and they were rigorously researched. And I remember watching those films and just my mind being open to different possibilities of making drama. You know, of those dramas were made, like Dockers was made with with people who'd gone through that experience. It was co-written between Jimmy McGovern and a community of women, of wives of Dockers, you know, and they wrote it together, and Jimmy McGovern took a co-writing credit on it, and there's just such integrity to that type of work, you know. And I didn't go into college trying to find this type of moments. I went into college thinking I could be a photographer, I could work as an editor, I like creative writing, you know. But film and TV was a big part of that period, and I was being exposed to all these things. But Jimmy McGovern's work made a big impact on me around that time, you know. And it reminded me of Alan Bennett. Remember Alan Bennett? As you probably know, younger than me, but Alan Bennett.
No, Alan Bennett. Yes, I know Alan Bennett. Of course.
So you've seen the Talking Heads monologues. You know, I just thought they were incredible. You know, they were just, you know, really simple portraits of individual lives. So powerful. And I think it was like watching things like that. I thought perhaps the first creative impulses came where I thought, God, that's actually really, really attractive to try and consider a character, a person that I may have seen in my life that I could just do a portrait, you know, write something from that one. It's so simple. Those Talking Heads actually seemed very achievable, you know, even though obviously they're incredibly well written. But you know what I mean? There was simplicity to them. And actually, when I started teaching later, I one of the projects I would give documentary students is to do a portrait of a single person. Just to find one person, do one interview, and go out and whatever way you want to film it creatively, but just make it a portrait of their lives. There's a simplicity about that, and I think it's something that is exciting at the very beginning of a potential creative life. You know, it's just there's something very, very, there's an interest in others, you know, and there's research obviously as well that goes into it. So all that around that, there's no real light bulb moment, but around that time, I was sitting in small edit suites in Cláiste and I was going, I really like it here, you know, and I like this. I can see myself at the time. I think maybe I could be an editor, you know. But all this stuff was going on, and I was watching. You know, obviously we're watching lots of films, like, you know, we're watching, you know, all the like Scorsese and Kieslowski and Ken Loach and Woody Allen and who else, you know, Bergman and all the, you know, we were watching all these films as well. And I was just being educated really, really, it was just an immersion of I was, you know, of all this work. And then I did a 1-year postgraduate. I decided that I really would love to specialize in film, because out of all of that experience of working in photography and all these different disciplines on the media course, that was the one area that just drew me the in the most powerful way. And that 1 year, I spent 1 year in DIT, and I did a postgrad in film production, and that was it. Then I just absolutely loved it.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me maybe about the inception of your collaboration, which eventually led to Ballymun Lullaby, and working in that community? How that happened?
Okay, well, Ballymun Lullaby, it was a long kind of it took a long time to get there. I worked in community videos, charity videos for a long time, and I'd met Ron Cooney, the teacher, in the center of that film, making one of those projects, and we stayed in contact, and we a great inspiring person. I was teaching at the time, and I looked at him. I just really looked up to him, and admired him, his energy, his enthusiasm, what he's, the authenticity of what he's trying to do is just amazing. And I think it was 2004. I made a community video with Ron, and spent 6 months out there, and then 5 years later, as part of Ballymun Regeneration, they launched a music room, a concrete building made as part of the Ballymun Regeneration for him, for what he's doing. And it was, and I went out to film the opening of this music room, and I just said, well, if ever, I said to my good friend Kevin Duffy, who shot all the community videos with me, if we're ever going to make a longer film, this should be the subject, and that's how that started. So it was a lot. I met him 5 years previously, and still a very good friend of mine today.
Just like to welcome Paul in there. Can you hear us there, Paul?
Hello.
Are you Skyping somebody else?
Yeah, no, I lost you there. But,
how you doing, Paul?
You're kind of in and out, Paul.
Yeah, it's a bit hairy here today, so I have to apologize for anybody. I'm trying to ask the least amount of questions so that I'm not choppy. So
yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to take over there for a bit, and I'll just have a little look here and see what's causing problems for me.
So yeah, great to chat to you again, Frank. So yeah, with Ballymun Lullaby, I remember you saying that it was interesting that you actually found that story was kind of replicated around the world. It kind of it was probably unknown to you. It was kind of a more universal story than you realized.
Yes, I remember. After we made Ballymun Lullaby, traveling around with it and going to different cities. And I remember on one occasion we went to Toronto for the TIFF Kids Festival, and the music teacher of that community, a community called Regent's Park, did the Q&A with me, and he said to me the exact same thing was happening there. And I remember we went to LA with the film, and had the same conversation with the lady from the audience talking about South Central, about these community initiatives where, there's just these incredible people working in the community, trying to engage young people in this. I guess, a very, very local story, it can resonate widely, and actually in a way it transcends the kind of the local. It becomes more universal, if you understand what I mean. It actually when you focus on something very, very small like that, so much is with other initiatives and communities can relate to it.
There's a good question here on that point from Michelle Duffy. what are the most important things for you that you brought from documentary into fiction filmmaking?
Well, it's a good question. Documentary filmmaking is obviously where my fiction work came from. You know, for Ballymun Lullaby, I spent 2 years in Ballymun, and we got to know the community of people around the music program, the parents, the teachers, the you know, the young people, obviously themselves, and it became this really wonderful place to be. And I just love the idea of telling a story with a community, you know, trying to depict this story truthfully as I could, and to listen very carefully to what people are telling me, and to try and just do justice to that on screen. And then after that film, I was going to make another documentary, actually, because I love that experience so much. And it's when I saw an article in the Irish Times about suicide clusters among teenagers, I thought, you know, it just wouldn't leave me alone. That article, I was deeply affected by it, and we actually had interest to make another. I was working on another music documentary, and Screen Ireland Film Board at the time liked it. I mean, I was saying that it came from a documentary place, really, which perhaps explains the authenticity, because I didn't really want. I was working so closely with a small group of people that I wanted to depict their lives as truthfully as possible, really, you know. The idea was that, you know, I worked with Headstrong for about a year, and we about you know, researching about the issue of suicide clusters, and basically for a year I was kind of educating myself on the subject, and then we went out. I got a call from Michelin in Headstrong, who said to me, "Frank, there's a small community out in Tala who are making a drama about their own you know, tragic circumstances." And I went out and I met them, and they're still my friends today. You know, Eileen, Trish, and Anto, who's in the UK now, and Hilda. And I remember that first meeting with the youth workers, and they were in despair. They were in such despair. They didn't know, you know, what to do, and they're making this small short film to try and make sense of this trauma in their community. And from then there was no way I wasn't going to make the film. It was just, I felt that we could do this together. And similar to Ballymun Lullaby, in a way, just work together. And I just started this process, you know, where I just would go a couple of times a week into the community centre, got to know the young people, and did camera workshops, did what I do, my day job, you know, teaching, you know, and then just sat there in the community, in the youth drop-ins, and got to know everybody. And over a period of time, we started doing acting workshops, and it didn't feel that different to Ballymun Lullaby in a way. You know, it really didn't. I didn't feel like, oh, now I'm in drama. I was in documentary before. It felt similar, that we had a story to tell. And in a way, if the drama didn't work, then if the young people, you know, if the performances weren't there or whatever, well, then maybe we could do interviews as a backup, and then use scenes or whatever, you know. But we tell the story no matter what, you know. The story would be told. It's an important story to tell. And, you know, so even though it was a drama, it didn't feel that way until we actually started filming. That's when it started to change, and it became a different environment, you know. The idea was that it's an expression from this community. So the crew were all from this one community. They either teaching or working there. The cast were all taking part in activities in the community centre, and it's an expression from them, perhaps similar to way a documentary might be, you know, an expression of something that's of a particular place. So it was when we started doing tests on the street, and when we started actually embarking on on drama that it started to feel different.
Would it be fair to say that you don't actually technically cast?
Yeah, for that film, it was. I mean, when I think back on it now, it was so emotionally draining and heavy, and you know, the conversations all the time were about vulnerable young people, and you know, I'm going down every week, and then there's a responsibility that goes with that, you know, and you have to commit, and you can't let people down, you know, and when somebody says, Frank, like, are you making you the one making the film? Can I be involved? You know, then the answer is always yes, always, and always open to everybody. I'll find I'll find a place. I'll find we'll, you know, just come with me and we'll work it out. You know, we'll find a role for you, or we'll find behind the camera perhaps. And the answer is always yes. And then some people would take the piss out of you, you know, early on, but then like a year later they would start taking part in it, and that I felt that really excited then, because I felt, you know, we kind of earned something over time, you know. And for me, time is always, it's a bit like documentary as well. I know there's some documentary filmmakers here. I see Kim is here, Kim Bartley, but there's some documentary. So it's similar to documentary filmmaking, you know, in that time, really, it's not like, okay, we're going to start on Thursday and then we have until we have 2 weeks to shoot it, you know. Over time, you build trust and you build, you know, you bond, and with that, there's huge rewards with that when you're making a film. You know, that time you get so much back from people, and it's exciting to see what happens. And there's no way this would ever have happened if I was only here for a couple of weeks, you know. And then people start talking to you, and young people start opening up to you, and then they feel able to tell you this doesn't work, and you know, I would never say that, and I'm always all ears. To try and represent them as much as truthfully as I can, I guess. You know?
Do you think that there's an element of, you know, you kind of being the magician that's come into town, and there's that magic of people not knowing who you are, how you work, and it's kind of almost by osmosis, everything is happening and very organic. And now you've moved on to another feature after that, and working very similarly as well. But now all of a sudden there's a lot of people who know who you are. So it's like, you know, particularly, for example, say actors who are auditioning for you become performers all of a sudden when they're meeting with you potentially down the line for something. And that kind of, how do you think you'll cope with the transition from, I know, you know, working a very specific way, in a very rootsy, earthy way, to maybe when the budgets are considerably higher, or the stakes have changed, or bigger names are involved, which inevitably, in terms of performers, would, you know, down the line will happen. How will you keep the game up, as it were?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I think the role of the director in terms of the relationship with the actor is to be there to provide whatever the actor needs. You know, to do what they have to do. And when it's something like I Used to Live Here, and they're all non-professionals, what they need is very similar, each individual. You know, they need to feel comfortable. They need to trust you. They need to feel free, and they need to fundamentally understand 100% every single syllable of every word that they're saying, and also to help them to feel that it's coming from within them. You know, that's the key, is that they own it, and that's so that's what they all needed. So I developed a process, you know, from reading about films my whole life, and you know, learning about different ways of working with actors, and that. Of working with the young people, you know, where we didn't use the word acting at all. We just said it was just them saying the lines over and over again, and then asked them to put down the scripts, and then just say, okay, say it to each other, and then they'd laugh, and then they'd get to the end of the scene, and I'd say, okay, that doesn't sound so bad, and before they know it, they're acting. They got around it, you know. And It's not, but you know what I mean. And it's actually, it sounds like something they would hear in their own world, so it makes sense to them. When I went on to Michael Inside, it was a different ball game, obviously, because you're working with Mo Dunford and Lola Roddy, but the approach I took was the very same, which is to be there to try and provide what each actor needs. So what I did was I was just attentive to their process and to the way they work, and I was very, very clear that they understood everyone individually required something slightly different from me, and I just listened to them very, very carefully to make sure that they weren't feeling insecure, and that they understood what they were in, and they understood the purpose of everything. And so an awful lot happens before the shoot. So you provide that for people early, during coffees and conversations early on. And for me, that's very, very, that's really, really important. That there's a that feeling that sometimes you see when in a scene when you feel like the actor doesn't fully understand. Sometimes you get that, and I feel that a director's job is really to be there to form a relationship with the actor, to make sure that there's a shared understanding, and that there's a that they're making the same work. So every actor has a slightly different process. And you see, with the non-professional actors, you're just trying to get them to kind of be themselves, really, and forget about the camera. But with actors, obviously, it's a craft, and they have to be different characters. So it's a totally different thing. And so I have to try and be mindful of what that process is that they use for their craft, and to help them as best as I can. And to listen to them.
How did based on your experiences of your first narrative feature, how did Michael Inside come about?
Okay, well, Michael Inside, the kind of the idea for Michael Inside came to me while I was making I Used to Live Here. When I was making I Used to Live Here, I spent a lot of time with the young people in the community, looking at the world from their point of view, talking to them, listening to them, and getting to know them. But I was there for quite a while, so you get to know some of the young people, then they'd go, and then other young people would come in, and speaking to the youth workers all the time, you're just getting this feeling of the vulnerability of many of them, and the difficulties in their lives, and in their of people in their area, and that. And Love Hate was a big show at the time, and they're like Nidge, and these guys were all up on billboards, and young people were talking about Love Hate a lot. And that's not denigrating that at all, but it's I felt there was another story that I was seeing in front of me, and talking to the youth workers about a lot of young people who didn't want to be criminals, but who end up in Smithfield before the courts and racking up charges, and for small things that they're doing that other people are asking them to do or pressuring them to do, and even just the peer pressure of everybody going down and to the cinema and buying pizza at the weekend, and you've no money, and just the peer pressure of their environment to engage in criminal activity. And I just stayed with me, because I got to know a lot of the young people very well, and you worry about them, and I just got the idea of, well, there's obviously a lot of middle-aged people now who have been through the prison system, who were once like that, and let's try and pull the thread a little bit and see what the path is. And so I started talking to former prisoners, and I talked about exactly what I'm saying now. I just spoke to the manager of Pathways about my time in working in communities, and the story that I wanted to tell, that's when he said, just come down and talk to the former prisoners, and I spoke to them about about these young people, and obviously a lot of them were those young people at one point, and felt very, very and passionately that they wanted to tell the story, you know, because they're in an educational environment now. They're in a positive place. They've come out of prison and they're starting an education, so they want to do something positive. And so that was an amazing education for me, those 18 months going in and out of Pathways. And we talked about Michael, and we talked about, you know, Tala, where I made my last film, and they talked, and I talked about the vulnerability of a lot of young people, and they said they know people in prison who are just like Michael, or they relate to Michael themselves. And 18 months I went in and talked about life, really. It's just it's not really talking about prison, it's talking about life, you know, and circumstances and society, circumstances people are living in, you know. So that's how that happened. And then, you know, they wanted to tell the story of the lead up to a young person going to prison, and the impact it has on your mental health. And this all came from the former prisoners, you know. They knew all the prison films and all the prison dramas, and they said no one talks about the real the prison starts when a sentence is likely or definite, you know, in their mind. It's just weighs on them. I thought, yeah, what's going on? You know, Michael inside, you know, the inner workings of this young man, and the dread and the pain, really, you know. That's a fascinating subject, you know. And then what happens to him when he comes out? And they'd loads to say about that, you know. And then, you know, of course, there's a Niall teaches criminology in Pathways, and he was giving me books about recidivism and all that stuff, and I was reading that, and you know, and the whole picture, you know.
So actually, the last time I spoke to you, we had you on the podcast, and it was just before it had been released. It was a few months before the cinema release and Netflix and all that. What sort of a reaction? Because you already talked about people kind of telling you and how that about their stories and how it informed. You must have got a huge reaction of people coming up to you after the film was made and after getting such a great response on Netflix and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the response to the story, I guess it's still going, you know, because it's still on Netflix, so still getting responses, and it's been used to also in universities. You know, people. I guess the great thing about drama is that you can talk about particular characters, you know, and as case studies and that, and you know, a lot of the former prisoners. I remember we screened it for the first time for the Pathways guys, the participants in Pathways, and we screened it it was a bit like screening it in a train station lobby area or something. It was very very noisy, very painful for me, but it was great. Like, it was one of the most memorable screenings that we had. It was so boisterous and so kind of you know. I mean, we screened it in the prisons as well, but the screening in Pathways, that first screening in Pathways was but it was true to their experience, you know, and that's the most important thing for me, you know, is that they were happy. That's the first thing I always look for. It's the same that I used to live here. I'm sure a lot of the filmmakers here listening will agree. This type of work, I suppose, is that the thing that you look for the most is that the people you've made the film with, that that they're happy with it, I guess, you know. That's so I was delighted with that.
Do you rehearse a lot? I mean, and I don't mean like necessarily on the day, like running it a number of times. See it, like you'd have a number of sessions beforehand or a number of weeks to refine. And would that inform the writing of the script as well, or do you take notes and literally write the script based on the scenes that were maybe improvised in a kind of a, you know, Mike Leigh way or a Loach way perhaps, or do you do a day's work improvising stuff and then go off and write based on that?
Yeah, well, it was different for both films. For I Used to Live Here, it was all workshops for a long time, and that was really a process of searching for me, of searching for the authenticity and for the heart of the film, and listening to the young people. So that was a process of writing and rehearsing for a long time, and then I try and do as much of that as I can. And then once we start shooting, as little as possible of kind of improvisation and all of that. I'd rather know exactly what we're doing on the day, and then leave room for the wonderful things that can happen, but not to rely on improvisation or any of those techniques on the day. For Michael Inside, I did a lot of workshops with the former prisoners, even though I was straight up with them at the beginning. I said, you probably won't be playing the major parts in this film, but they didn't mind. They acted them out. I filmed them on my little video camera and watched them, and they would challenge the scenes. It was really an authentication process in a way. They would challenge the scenes. I would change what was where they had objections to in terms of realism and that, and then bring it back to them. And then we'd have a big table reading, and I'd give everybody parts to read, and then we'd act out some more. So then by the time we got to pre-production, I was really kind of felt confident that the script was authentic, or had an authenticity to it. And then when we cast the film, not a lot of rehearsals, just a couple of days with Dav and Lawler, but that was really it. Not an awful lot of rehearsals, and then, like the whole idea of the way we shoot, which is mostly one shot per scene, was that we have a set script, and we do it a few times, and then it can develop, on the day, and it can evolve a little bit in terms of blocking, can evolve based on the location. So we end up doing 10 to 15 takes of every shot, of every scene, really. And it takes about the same amount of time as it would if you were doing standard coverage. But the idea is that it's most of the scene takes place in the one time period, so that adds, in my view, to the realism. There's no conventional cross-cutting. Not that anything wrong with that, but for it was a process that I felt suited. I used to live here because I didn't want to treat not all the non-professional actors as actors and say, okay, we're going to move the camera over here now, we're going to shoot the whole thing again, we're going to move the camera here, we shoot the whole thing again. I felt it made more sense to them, and it was more realistic to actually shoot the whole thing in one go, and then say, well, what wasn't great about that? Then start from scratch and do it all again, and we'll evolve the camera, we'll evolve the blocking, we'll put out some dialogue, we'll evolve the pulling focus, and we'll just keep going over and over again, and refine it and refine it. And we get to take 15, and we got it, and then Colin, the editor, might choose it. 13, like you had it 2 takes ago, type of thing, But that's the and that so I took that process into Michael Inside, and I think it's a process that actors like, There's I think with the non-professional actors, it made sense. Why are we doing this again? Well, this is why we're doing it again, and you're improving it all the time, So perhaps you could call that a little bit. The first maybe 4 or 5 takes might be able to characterize those as rehearsals in a way, because we're still finding it, really. Do you know what I mean?
What, if anything, can you tell us about your next project? Don't feel like you have to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'm hoping to make it at some point. I don't know when though. With this current situation, certainly the environment's going to be different to make a film. There's going to be obviously a lot of changes, but it's a love story set in the world of direct provision. So it's about a young woman from Niger, and she's in Ireland seeking international protection, and she meets security guard who starts in the center, and it's a story that I guess it's full of hope for people seeking protection in the world to have compassion and respect human rights, and oppression very much a factor of the Irish system, and you know, a love story set against that exposes it. I feel, you know, and so you know, it's a film that I've worked on for. I think I met Lucky from one of the groups I'm working with about 3 years ago in January. So it's been a long time, and the script is finished. We're hoping to make it perhaps the end of the year, maybe if we're lucky, or maybe early next year. But again, it's a process of listening and trying to put across something that is true and authentic. And you know, we had a script, or not a script reading, a treatment reading there, and we're going to have a script reading next. And again, just authentication, and trying to make sure that you know, I mean, it's such an evolving situation, you know, and it's so you know, I know I make films that are difficult subjects, you know, but this one as well is such a tough situation for so many people in Ireland, you know, the way they're forced to live, really. And it's a film that needs to be made.
What is it specifically about, I suppose kind of oppressed minorities or socialist values that motivates you? Is it a conscious thing, or are you just drawn empathetically to people and their struggles?
Well, it's a good question, and it sounds like I'm going from issue to issue, you know, but it's really not like that, actually. It's exactly as you just said, where it's just a compassionate motivation, you know, and I don't think a film needs to have a very big social issue for it to have those qualities, you know. But for these first 3 films, they're just subjects that I'm drawn to, you know. The world of someone who goes to prison, you know. I remember that very first meeting I had. It was with Lucky Campbell from Massey for the Movement for Asylum Seekers Ireland, and also Shane O'Curry from DNR, which is the European Network Against Racism. And I walked out of the meeting. This was 3 years ago in January, and I was just like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, how awful it was. And that's, I guess, there's a threshold for me in a way, you know, where I hear something and I feel I really, you know, someone said to me once that unless you feel slightly obsessed by a subject, then you really shouldn't make a film, you know, in a way. And for me, it's like once I start and I have characters in my mind, and that's it. I daydream about them, and I think about the film, you know, like with Amy and her dad, the way Amy took over in the house after her mom died, and she was running, you know, a lot of the household, and what you know, what's going on in her life, and speaking about her to the people in Headstrong, you know, to Tony Bates, who was a big mentor of mine, and the same with the former prisoners, talking about Michael and his granddad. And now it's Ishtar and Connor I've been thinking about for the past few years. So it's just characters, and just trying to, knowing that so much of what they experience is true, you know, wanting to tell that story, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'm going to be going from social issue to social issue. That's not necessarily a plan
no
at
way
all.
was I insinuating.
You know,
I mean, let's be honest.
People,
I mean, if every, for example, comedy
to.
was, you know, like the comedies we know and love, we'd watch comedies all day, every day. You know. So what I'm saying is, you're doing something right. I'm just wondering. where the impetus comes from. You know.
Let's just open it up to
maybe
some of the questions. We can kind of race through these.
Yeah, sure.
Do you work with a script editor, and what's your advice on showing actors the full script before casting?
Okay. First question is, I didn't have a script editor on I Used to Live Here, and I Used to Live Here was very much it was me and the community, really. So my script editors were people I was working with, and constantly interrogating the script with them and trying to get a story that I felt would work on the screen with them. For Michael Inside, I had a script editor for a while, because Screen Ireland, you know, when the Screen Ireland funding is in place, then you have to go through that process, and that was quite helpful. It wasn't a major part of the process. On this film now, I've had a brilliant experience with a script editor, and she, you know, was you know, really gave great notes that weren't all about, for me, which I don't necessarily respond very well to, script writing rules and 3-act structure. And she was very knowledgeable about the world of people seeking international protection. Excuse me. And she was curious about it, and she just asked me questions about that. And I was imagining somebody like her as an audience member, and it was just a wonderful experience. Sarah Golding's her name. She was absolutely fantastic. So I had a great experience with a script editor on this one. Regarding whether to give the script to the cast or not, that really depends on the story, depends on the filmmaker. For I Used to Live Here, I didn't give the script. I just gave the young people the scenes. They knew the story. We talked about the story a lot with youth workers, with parents. We very carefully, you know, worked with young people regarding, you know, around the sensitive issues. So I didn't give them the script, not because I was withholding it from them, but because it was a document that was there, it was lying around, but I didn't think the young people were that really interested in reading the full screenplay. There's also something to be said for, if it's not necessarily needed, if everybody's fully engaged and on board and knows exactly what they're doing, you know, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to employ something like that. You know, this is what we're doing, the whole thing. There you go. I just intuitively going with the flow, really, and just going, no, this is working. This is working. This is working. For Michael Inside, some people got the script. I chose not to give the script to David because there is something about, you know, the journey. David knew what the film was about, and he knew the journey, but he didn't know all of it. And I wanted to try and see, you know, what could we film some kind of responses to the environment. For example, when he's walking down the stairs to the holding cells, you know, he'd never been there before, and he didn't know we were going to be shooting it that day. So when he's looking around, he's kind of responding to the environment around him. And I mean, but other actors did read the script. And if David said to me, Frank, I'd love to read the script, I probably would have gone, I probably would have talked to him about it and said, okay, well, look, here's the pros and here's the cons, you know. And he's so open to the process. He totally gets it. Like, he said, okay, Frank, if you think that's better, you know, whatever, or if he convinced me that he really needed it. That was the type of conversation that we were having. And I said to him at the beginning, you know, maybe not, you know, and he goes, all right, no problem. Now the script was lying around.
Know what was going to happen to his character,
as we were shooting, and he didn't pick it up and go to page 96, whatever, you know. Okay. Just
that's brilliant.
No, he didn't. He didn't know. So yeah, so and he was totally on board with it all. He's an absolutely wonderful collaborator and great actor, you know. Yeah. So but I didn't. But I think to answer the question, it depends on the script, depends on the director, you know. But like, you know, Lawler, Roddy, and Mo Dunford would have read the script,
just one or two more questions here.
They're coming at it.
Ger Walsh, you know? Another fellow director. How are you, Frank? Can you tell me what it was like going from something like I Used to Live Here, and then and the way that you shot that, to Michael Inside with a much bigger crew and different circumstances?
Yeah, we should be having this conversation over the coffee that we never had, Ger. But anyway, we'll have it. Okay, well, yeah. I mean, it's a great question, because the big challenge for me was the response to I Live Here was good, I think, you know, from producers and industry, and that, you know, they think they recognized the qualities in it. And so I knew I would probably be able to make a film with a budget afterwards. But the question is, could I employ this community kind of process with, like, you know, a massive crew and first ADs and, you know, camera crews and all that, because what we did with I Live Here was very, very different. You know, we shot on weekends, and it was a totally different process. So my worry was, could I do it? You know, 6 week shoot, not being able to just take the rushes home and look at them and go, okay, that's working, and not having that luxury. And so what I decided to do early on was to, after we crewed everybody and we were in pre-production, was just to talk to all the individuals involved in the film about where I'm coming from, basically. And I was so, it was a great way to start, because I was so happy with the response that I got. I was worried that people would say, oh, we don't do it like that, or, you know, okay, okay, you know, instead the HODs, you know, came out to Pathways and spoke to former prisoners, and I felt that everybody was coming with me, you know. So I think if you're really confident about where you are, and you know where you are, and you know what you want to do, that's all anybody wants to know. You know, they really just want to know, do you know what you're doing? Is there a reason for all of this? You know, and they'll go with you. And you know, like I said this after Michael Inside, that I loved the shoot so much I didn't want it to end, and people were thinking like I had two heads, you know. But I think it's that process, it's that kind of I didn't want to be in a situation where I'm surviving the shoot, you know, where I was just trying to get to the end and just survive it. I wanted to actually enjoy it, and you know, it took me I went a really long road to get to this place, I suppose, you know, to feel that confidence in my work. You know, it took a long time to get there. But Michael Inside was when it all kind of transferred into the world of bigger feature filmmaking.
What's the best way to get yourself?
It was a kind of a big project for me. You know?
When you're starting out, is it annoying for people if you reach out to them directly?
Yeah.
Never annoying. Honestly, it's never annoying, because we were all there, and I'm, you know, seriously. So I feel that, you know, it's so, because, you know, I teaching for many years, and I've met an awful lot of great, enthusiastic, you know, film students and graduates over the years. It's really competitive, and you just have to work really hard. You have to just be kind of, you know, you have to be prepared to really kind of, you know, put your name out there. You know, contact the line producers. You know, contact the directors. For me, it's never annoying, honestly. But I can't say yes to everybody. But I every time an email pops in, I think about myself at that age, you know, and I can either help people or I'll reply, and I can't, you know. But it's very, very competitive. So much more than 20 years ago, actually. It's, you know, there's an awful lot of people looking for those placements on those films. We only, you know, so just my advice would be just to work hard at it, and just to
how important
you know,
is it to be
contact
mindful of people and
a lot of
kind
people and
in those
work,
circumstances?
you know. I think it's hugely important. You know, I think it's and I think the industry is an awful lot kinder than people think. You know, I think we all can relate to that fear of being on the outside, and everybody knows each other, and it's this kind of this club, and, you know, I feel that if people make the effort, they'll probably be surprised, that more often than not, you'll get a compassionate and helpful response. It's in everybody's interest to evolve the industry and to help people, So, but I think it's really, really important, because what it does is, if you treat people with respect in the industry, then they will treat people with respect in a couple of years' time. It just fosters a really great environment. Like years ago when I was in college and I was doing work experience, I did experience some arrogance and some not very pleasant exchanges and that. The thinking back then, I remember, was that, well, I went through it, so you have to go through it, and you're a runner and you have to go and just put up with it because I did, and that's the industry. So I think we could change that by actually just encouraging people who are starting out and who are trying to get places in the industry,
right,
and
absolutely.
then when they get there, then they'll do the same, and just fosters a more compassionate environment.
Paul, were you going to do this? I think you're going to do the same.
I think that's happening.
Yeah, probably. Well,
do you want to do it?
I think it's a good place to leave it. There's some lovely questions, lovely just statements on the side, Frank. So if you have a few minutes after, it might be nice to have a look for yourself. There's people saying very lovely stuff about yourself and your filmmaking. So yeah, I guess good time to leave it there. Do you want to queue up what's happening next, Paul?
Yeah. I just also want to thank Fiona Clark, who is the festival director manager of the Cork Film Festival, who left a lovely note there for you, Frank, about your work and your process. And so have a little look at that. And just another statement there from Jer, who said that he loves the way that you treated Dermot in the film. It was one of his favourite parts of the film. A lot of people would have just let the actor completely ham it up and be super aggressive, but you seem to have downplayed the character a lot. Was that a collaborative decision, or was it something that you had in mind for the character? So there was a question there. From Jer Walsh.
So from Michael's side, it was a very much, that's how it was written. It was written it came from a conversation in Pathways. It was actually a talk that happened that day, and there was a lot of former prisoners getting involved in it. And it was basically about this report that came out called "Demanding Money with Menace," and it was about this terrible trend in crime in Ireland, where these new criminals are just ruthless, just walk into your house and they pick up the TV, walk out the door with it, and there's a sense of entitlement. I won't go on, but it's so I wanted that sense of, it's more terrifying how entitled they feel, and for them to just walk in, and it's what happens. So I didn't feel tempted to go and make it more violent or more kind of glamorous in that way. It's terrifying enough, and true, So it came straight from that from that day. So I mean, it's not a strand to the film I ever would have thought. This threatening narrative is not something I thought would go into the film. It was all about Michael. But it was just that day I thought, well, no, there's forces outside as well, and this is something that is really important, So
okay, we kept you a little bit longer, but that's because we had some technical hiccups.
I hope that
answers
the chair.
Thanks so much. We owe you, I think, more than 1 point at this point.
Yeah.